We see for the first time in this episode this hut sitting here quite near the lagoon. I'm sure that because the storyline calls for the Mars space probe to see a hut on the island, they had to come up with a way to put a hut within view of that camera. It may show up in later episodes, I don't think so, but I'll let you know if we find that. Note here that the castaways were lucky enough while on the boat to have some Heath candy bars, looks like a whole box full. I'm sure that these feathers were hard to deal with on the set. Here we can see a little bit of fringe from the top of a feather coming and going on Mr. Howell's jacket. Note here we have two different camera setups and two different feathers. In the close-up shot here, the feather is yellow and the base of the feather is in Gilligan's right hand. Then we move to the longer shot. We can see the feather has changed to a darker gold color and the base of the feather is now in Gilligan's left hand. Not only did they have to deal with feathers in this episode, but they also had to deal with a lot of things that reflect. That's always a problem when you have things like that because it's so easy to see equipment and lighting. And here I want to point out in the lens of the space probe this reflection. And more than likely they used a couple what are called softbox lights. Here we see a pair of really fast hands. First we see Bancroft just putting his glasses on, and we will note that Corwell's left hand is down. And then immediately we see that Bancroft's glasses are totally on and his hands are down to the control panel, and Corwell's left hand is now up to his ear. They must have anticipated this United States flag to be a flag of the future. While it does have 13 stripes, we will see that the stars are 7 by 11 or 77 stars total. Here's some good continuity between these two successive shots of Mrs. Howell's banana. It would have been very easy to have this banana be very different lengths and different stages of unpeeling. Here's something I thought was worth pointing out. If you look in the background here in this scene where Gilligan first discovers the probe, I see this black object. It kind of looks like a speedboat or some kind of a raft. And then later in a scene where the professor and the skipper are out there also, it's gone. So I'm wondering if it was some type of a crew boat that they left in this scene. Here's a little bit of a script or storyline hole. Earlier at the control panel, they know the probe has landed, but they never did get an image up to the point of landing.
Well, it's landed.
Then later, when they're listening to the radio, they said shots from the space probe just before landing showed a primitive hut.
Was reached when photographs taken from the TV camera just before impact clearly revealed palm trees and primitive huts.
When in reality, the first pictures of the hut were long after it landed. They did a nice job on this prop. It looks complicated on the inside like you would expect. I always thought this was kind of a strange shot. As Gilligan leaves the scene, the skipper and professor are both looking as though they're watching him go, and yet they're both looking in two totally different directions. As I had mentioned, this is a tough episode with all these reflecting gadgets they have. Here you can see plenty of lights in this round metal sphere. I'm still not sure they did a much better job on Mrs. Howell's ring in this episode. It still looks to me like the glass doorknob used in episode 9, but maybe with the bottom sawn off. Notice the free advertising for CBS with the CBS eye located on this microphone. Observe the unusual arrangement of the grass in this shot. It was probably used to cover the hoses which caused the glue pipes to spout. Would have been easier to do it this way than to bury the hoses in the sand. The skipper is supposed to be hopelessly stuck in the glue in this shot, and yet as this scene ends and starts to fade out, you can see that he is able to move his leg and start to get away. Here's a little mix-up on these badges. John's badge clearly looks like an L and not a J for his first name, and George's could possibly be a G for George, but it looks more like a C. This scene actually only drives me half nuts because this looks to me like a mixture of fake money and real money. You can see a few ones here that look real, but here is a fake one. There's a ton of changes between these two shots during the few seconds that they look at the boiling glue. Here in shot number 1, Mr. Howell is holding his money. Mrs. Howell has her purse in her left hand. Ginger is totally to the right, and the skipper and Gilligan are pretty much in the middle of the crowd. And now just a few seconds later, Mrs. Howell is holding a purse in her right hand. Mr. Howell has lost his money, and the skipper is holding his sign. You can see it down there, but now the skipper and Gilligan have moved totally to the right of the crowd, and they're all huddled together. This is a well-done explosion effect. I'll slow it down here, and you can even see that it explodes out through the bottom like it probably really would do. Here, after the castaways are covered with the hot glue, they look disgusted at Gilligan, but in reality they should be screaming because they're covered with boiling hot glue. Someone must have been snacking on the Heath bars because you'll notice they are now gone. You can see here a bunch of bundles of feathers being dropped from the top down that never went up there in the first place, just to add a little feather action to the scene. The professor says,
What were all those feathers doing in the hut?
when he already knew.
You guys won't take any of the feathers when I'm not looking, will you?
We have more important things to do.
Notice they did a nice job on this automatic door opening and closing for the cuckoo clock shot. You can't see any strings or bars or anything doing it.